Let me start with something that will make you uncomfortable. If you're keeping most of your money in a bank account waiting for the right time to invest, you're not playing it safe. You're choosing a guaranteed loss. And I can prove it with simple arithmetic that a high school student should understand. But somehow very smart people miss this constantly. Here's the math nobody wants to face. If inflation runs at 3% annually and your savings account pays 0.5%, you're losing 2.5% of your purchasing power every single year. That's not a risk, that's a certainty. Over a decade, you'll lose about 25% of what that money can actually buy. Not what it says on the bank statement, but what it can do in the real world. And that's assuming inflation stays at the government's polite number. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Charlie, cash feels safe. I can see the number. It doesn't go down. That's the problem right there. You're watching the wrong number. You're measuring nominal dollars when you should be measuring purchasing power. It's like celebrating that your car's speedometer still works while ignoring that you're running out of gas. The psychology here is predictable. We humans suffer from what I call deprival superreaction tendency. We hate losing what we have more than we enjoy gaining something new, so we clutch our cash, terrified of market volatility, while inflation quietly pickpockets us year after year. We're so afraid of a 20% drawdown that might recover that we accept a guaranteed 30% loss over a decade. That's not rational. That's just expensive fear. Let me give you a principle that saved me from countless mistakes. Always invert. Instead of asking, what should I buy? Ask, what are the ways I'm certain to lose? When you invert the cash question, the answer becomes obvious. Holding cash in an inflationary environment is choosing certain loss over uncertain but probable gain. You're picking the guaranteed wrong answer because it feels comfortable. I learned this from studying physics, not economics. In physics, there's a concept called entropy. Things naturally move from order to disorder unless you add energy. Cash purchasing power has entropy. It decays naturally unless you do something about it. The second mental model you need is compound interest, except working against you. Einstein allegedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, but he should have mentioned it works both ways. When inflation compounds at 3% and your returns are essentially zero, you're watching reverse compound interest destroy your wealth in slow motion. It's painless enough that you don't notice year to year, but devastating over decades. Here's what people miss. They think volatility equals risk, but real risk is the permanent loss of purchasing power. A stock portfolio might drop 15% in a bad year. Sure, but cash is guaranteed to drop 3% in a good year, and that's forever. You never get it back. Warren and I didn't build Berkshire by holding cash. Held businesses, productive assets that throw off earnings, raise prices, and adapt to inflation. When we bought See's candies in 1972 for $25 million, people thought we overpaid. But SEs could raise prices. The brand had pricing power. Cash in a bank account has no such power. It just sits there shrinking in real terms, while productive assets grow and adapt. Let me tell you about 5 assets that are actually safer than cash. Safer in the only way that matters, which is preserving and growing your real purchasing power. And I'll explain the mental models behind each one so you can think for yourself. First, productive businesses, what most people call stocks, though I prefer to think of them as partial ownership in actual companies. Here's the key insight. A well-run business with pricing power naturally adjusts for inflation. Think about Coca-Cola, which Berkshire owns a significant piece of. When inflation hits, Coca-Cola doesn't just sit there losing value like a dollar bill. It raises prices. Its earnings grow. The value of your ownership grows with it. Now, I'm not saying buy just any stock. Most stocks are overpriced most of the time, and most investors are their own worst enemies. But owning pieces of great businesses, companies with strong brands, low capital requirements, and pricing power is fundamentally different from holding cash. The math is straightforward. Over the past century, stocks have returned about 10% annually, while inflation averaged about 3%. That's a real return of 7%. Cash has returned essentially zero real return and often negative. But here's what you must understand about your circle of competence. If you don't understand businesses, if you can't read a financial statement, if you panic and sell during downturns, then stocks aren't safer for you. You'll make them dangerous through your own behavior. This is where most investment advice goes wrong. People give universal prescriptions without accounting for the biggest variable, your own psychology and knowledge. Know what you know, and more importantly, know what you don't know. The second asset is productive real estate. Notice I said productive, not just any property, but property that generates income. A rental property that throws off cash flow is a productive asset, just like a business. Real estate has several advantages in an inflationary environment. Rents tend to rise with inflation. The mortgage, if you have one, stays fixed. You're paying back cheaper dollars over time, and the underlying asset often appreciates as construction costs rise. But again, Circle O. Competence matters. Being a landlord is work. It requires judgment, maintenance, tenant selection. If you don't know what you're doing, you'll buy the wrong property at the wrong price and wonder why real estate doesn't work for you. Warren and I have owned plenty of real estate through Berkshire, but always as productive assets, buildings that businesses operate from, land that serves a purpose, never speculation, always production. There's a crucial difference. Here's a test for any real estate investment. If the property stopped appreciating tomorrow, would you still want to own it based on the income it generates? If the answer is no, you're speculating, not investing. And speculation is just another form of gambling. The third asset is yourself, your skills, and earning power. This is the one asset everyone has, and it's criminally underinvested. Benjamin Franklin understood this. He said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Here's why this matters. In a discussion about cash, if you have $50,000 sitting in a bank account and you're early in your career, you might be making a terrible mistake. That money could fund education, training, or starting a business that multiplies your earning power tenfold. I've watched people scrimp and save, proud of their cash cushion, while their skills become obsolete. They're so focused on protecting what they have that they ignore the opportunity to become more valuable. That's backward thinking. Your earning power is the present value of all your future earnings. If you can increase that by 20% through better skills, you've created far more value than you could by investing that money in any asset. And unlike stocks, your skills can't be taken away by market crashes. But, and this is important, investing in yourself only works if you're honest about what skills actually matter. Learning underwater basket weaving doesn't count. Learn skills that create value for others, that are hard to replicate, that match real market demand. I spent my life learning across multiple disciplines: law, mathematics, psychology, physics, business. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because solving complex problems requires tools from different toolboxes. You can't build a house with just a hammer. The fourth asset, and this surprises people, is high-quality bonds in specific situations. Notice I said high quality in specific situations, not just any bonds, and certainly not most bonds in today's environment. Here's the mental model. A bond is a promise to pay you money in the future. The question is, what will that money be worth when you get it? If you buy a 30-year bond yielding 4% and inflation runs at 3%, you're barely ahead and you've locked up your money for 3 decades. But short-term bonds from creditworthy entities can serve a purpose. They're not there to make you rich. They're there to give you optionality, keeping your powder dry for when genuine opportunities appear while still earning something better than cash. Warren talks about having cash and equivalents at Berkshire. but notice he never has much of it, usually just enough to meet obligations and seize opportunities. The bonds are a temporary parking place, not a destination. The mistake people make is treating bonds as safety when they're really just slightly less cash like cash. In a high inflation environment, bonds can be just as dangerous as cash. Sometimes more so because they lock you in. Here's the rule. If a bond's yield doesn't significantly exceed expected inflation, you're volunteering to lose purchasing power in slow motion. At least with cash, you maintain liquidity. Bad bonds give you all the downsides of cash with none of the flexibility. The fifth asset is useful hard assets. Things that hold value because they're valuable to humans, not just because we agree they are. This is different from speculation in gold or cryptocurrency, which I'll address in a moment. I'm talking about assets like productive land, machinery that generates income, even a reliable vehicle if it enables you to earn money. These are things that do something that serve a function that would still matter even if the financial system had a heart attack. Now, let me be clear about gold. A lot of people think gold is the answer to inflation, but gold just sits there. It doesn't produce anything. It doesn't throw off earnings. You buy it hoping someone will pay you more for it later. That's not investing. That's speculation with an ancient pedigree. Warren jokes that we could take all the gold ever mined, form it into a cube, and it wouldn't produce anything except the need for more security guards. Meanwhile, with the same amount of money, you could buy businesses that generate billions in earnings every year, which sounds smarter to you. Hard assets only make sense if they're productive. A farm that grows crops, not farmland you're hoping to flip. Tools that enable you to build things, not collectibles you pray will appreciate. Function over hope. The common thread in all five assets is this. They do something. Businesses produce goods and services. Real estate houses people. Skills enable you to create value. Even bonds, when chosen wisely, provide optionality. They're active, not passive. Cash is passive. It just sits there slowly rotting in real terms, waiting for you to do something with it. The question isn't whether cash has a role. Of course it does for near-term needs and opportunistic flexibility. The question is whether it deserves to be your main strategy. Now, let's talk about why smart people keep making this mistake. Because understanding the psychology is crucial. It's not stupidity. Thank you, some very intelligent people are terrible with money. It's predictable patterns of human misjudgment. First, there's what I call the social proof tendency. Everyone you know keeps money in the bank. Your parents did it, your friends do it. It feels like the responsible adult thing to do, so you do it too without examining whether it actually makes sense. But just because everyone does something doesn't make it right. In Weimar, Germany, people who kept their savings in cash were wiped out. The socially normal thing was also the financially catastrophic thing. Social proof is a terrible way to make financial decisions. Second, there's availability misweighing tendency. The pain of losing money in a market crash is vivid and memorable. It's on the news. People talk about it. The stories stick in your mind. The quiet erosion of inflation is invisible and abstract, so you fear the wrong thing. You can see a stock drop 20% in a year. You can't easily see your purchasing power drop 3% per year for a decade. The second loss is actually worse. It's 30% and permanent. But the first feels worse because it's vivid. That's your brain lying to you. Third, there's what I call deprival superreaction tendency, which I mentioned earlier. We hate losing what we have so much that we'll do irrational things to avoid the feeling of loss, even if it means accepting certain loss to avoid uncertain loss. The solution isn't to ignore these tendencies. You can't. You're human. You'll always feel them. The solution is to know they exist. Name them when you see them and build systems that protect you from your own psychology. Here's my system and you can adapt it. I decided long ago what percentage of assets should be in different categories based on rational analysis, not emotion. Then I stick to it. I rebalance when needed. I don't check prices daily. I don't let fear or greed change the plan. This isn't complicated advice. It's boring, actually. But boring and rational beats exciting and emotional over any meaningful time horizon. The tortoise beats the hare not because he's faster, but because he doesn't sprint in random directions. Let me give you a framework for thinking about your own situation, because I can't tell you exactly what to do. I don't know your circumstances, your knowledge, your temperament, but I can give you the questions to ask. First question, what is my circle of competence? What do I actually understand? If you understand businesses, maybe you hold mostly stocks. If you understand real estate, maybe that's your focus. If you don't understand either, maybe you focus on low-cost index funds and developing your skills. Second question, what is my true risk? Not the volatility I see on a screen, but the chance I won't have enough purchasing power to live the life I want. For most people, the true risk is inflation destroying their savings, not a temporary market decline. Third question, what is my time horizon? If you need the money in 6 months, fine, keep it in cash. You have no choice. But if you don't need it for 10 years, why would you choose an asset guaranteed to lose value over that period? Fourth question, what are the second order consequences? This is where most people stop thinking too early. They think cash is safe and stop there. But the second order consequence is safe cash leads to poor retirement, reduced options, working longer than you want. Fifth question, what does inversion tell me? If I hold mostly cash for the next 20 years, what's the likely outcome? Can I accept that outcome? If not, what changes should I make today? These aren't rhetorical questions. Actually, write down your answers. You'll be shocked how much clarity you get from just thinking on paper. Most people never do this. They just react emotional and hope for the best. Now, here's something that makes people uncomfortable, but it needs to be said. The reason most people stay poor isn't lack of opportunity, it's lack of rationality. They make emotional decisions, follow crowds, avoid the math, and wonder why their financial life doesn't improve. You cannot think yourself rich through positive thinking or affirmations or any of that nonsense. But you can think yourself not poor by avoiding stupid mistakes, by understanding the power of compound interest, by not volunteering to lose purchasing power. Warren and I aren't rich because we're geniuses. We're rich because we're rational, patient, and we don't do stupid things. We don't panic sell. We don't chase hot trends. We don't confuse activity with accomplishment. We just try to not be idiots consistently over many decades. The power of this approach is that it's accessible to anyone. You don't need a high IQ. You don't need insider information. You don't need luck. You just need to be rational, honest with yourself, and patient. That's it. Those three things beat brilliance nearly every time. Here's a concrete example from our own experience. In the late 1990s, everyone was making money in tech stocks. The dot bubble was in full swing. People called us dinosaurs for not participating. They laughed at us for holding boring businesses like See's Candies and insurance companies. Then the bubble popped. People lost fortunes. But we didn't because we weren't playing that game. We stuck to what we understood, bought at sensible prices, and let everyone else chase the excitement. Being rational and patient looked stupid right until it looked brilliant. The same pattern has repeated countless times. People get excited, chase returns, panic when things turn, and lose money. Meanwhile, the rational approach, buying productive assets at sensible prices and holding them, just works. It's not exciting, but it works. Now let me address the elephant in the room. What about emergencies? Don't you need cash for emergencies? Of course you do. I'm not suggesting you put every dollar into stocks and pray nothing goes wrong. That would be stupid. The rule of thumb is simple. Keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash or near cash equivalents. That's your emergency fund. That's your sleep well at night money. That's the car broke down and the roof is leaking money. Keep it liquid. Keep it safe. Don't invest it. And is crucial, 3 to 6 months of expenses isn't 3 to 6 years of income. If you make $100,000 a year and spend $60,000, your emergency fund should be $15,000 to $30,000, not $300,000. Math matters. I see people with $200,000 sitting in a savings account for emergencies when they spend $40,000 a year. That's not emergency planning. That's financial malpractice. You've got 5 years of expenses sitting idle, losing 3% purchasing power annually when you only need 6 months. The rest of that money should be working for you in productive assets, in businesses that grow, and skills that increase your earning power, in anything that preserves and grows real purchasing power. That's not risky. That's responsible. Here's another uncomfortable truth. The financial industry often gives you terrible advice because their incentives don't align with yours. They make money from activity, from fees, from you being scared and needing their help. They don't make money from you being rational and patient. So they sell you complicated products. They tell you that you need an advisor to navigate complex markets. They imply that doing nothing, just holding great businesses for decades, is somehow irresponsible. It's nonsense, but profitable nonsense for them. The incentive to give bad advice is huge. If an advisor tells you to buy an index fund and ting for inflation, that's about $700,000 in today's purchasing power. The difference between cash and investing is the difference between poverty and comfort in retirement. I'm not making this up. This isn't speculation. This is what the historical data shows over and over again. The math is undeniable. And yet people still make the same mistake because it feels safe in the moment. This is what I mean by avoiding stupidity. You don't need to be a genius to see that losing 50% of your purchasing power is worse than risking temporary volatility. You just need to actually look at the numbers instead of making decisions based on feelings. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but Charlie, what if I invest right before a crash? What if I buy stocks and they drop 40% next year? That's a legitimate concern. Let me address it directly first. If you invest a lump sum and the market crashes immediately, yes, that's painful. But here's what history shows. If you hold for 10 years, the market has never failed to recover and reach new highs. If you hold for 20 years, you've always made money. Always. Not sometimes, always. Second, you don't have to invest everything at once. Dollar cost averaging. Investing a set amount regularly over time eliminates the timing problem. Sometimes you buy high, sometimes you buy low, and it averages out. Simple, effective. Removes the emotional decision making. Third, the market might crash after you invest. Sure, but it might also go up 30% right after you invest and then crash, leaving you still ahead of where you started. You can't predict timing. Nobody can. So make a rational decision and execute it. The alternative, waiting for the right time to invest, is choosing guaranteed loss to avoid potential loss. You're losing 3% per year to inflation while waiting for a crash that might not come, not be as bad as you fear, or might recover faster than you expect. Here's a principle I've lived by. When you can't predict outcomes, focus on the process. You can't control whether the market goes up or down next year. But you can control whether you're acting rationally, whether you're diversified, whether you're in your circle of competence. Good process consistently applied over time leads to good outcomes. Bad process occasionally gets lucky, but usually leads to disaster. The drunk driver sometimes makes it home safely. That doesn't make drunk driving a good strategy. Let me close with this. The title of this discussion was about assets better than cash. But the deeper lesson is about rationality versus emotion. about second-order thinking versus first-order reactions, about long-term planning versus short-term comfort. Cash isn't evil. It serves a purpose. But treating it as your primary asset, your safe harbor, your financial foundation, that's a mistake born from natural human psychology running headfirst into mathematical reality. And math always wins eventually. The 5 assets I've discussed: productive businesses, real estate, your own skills, strategic bonds, and useful hard assets aren't magic. They're just rational responses to a world where inflation exists and productivity compounds. They're choosing reality over comfort. Your job isn't to memorize what I've said and blindly implement it. Your job is to think, to understand the principles, to apply them to your own situation, to know your circle of competence, to be honest about your own psychology, and build systems that protect you from it. If you take nothing else from this, take this. Invert the question. Don't ask, how can I get rich? Ask, how can I avoid staying poor? The answer to the second question is clear. Don't volunteer to lose purchasing power. Don't confuse nominal numbers for real value. Don't let fear make you poorer. I'm 99Y. Years old as I'm recording this, and I've spent most of that time watching people make predictable mistakes with their money. The same mistakes over and over across generations. Not because people are stupid, but because they're human. The antidote to human nature isn't superhuman willpower or extraordinary intelligence. It's awareness, systems, and patience. Know your biases. Build guardrails. Think long term. That's not exciting advice, but it's advice that works. Warren and I built Berkshire Hathaway from a failing textile mill into one of the most valuable companies in the world. We didn't do it by being clever. We did it by being rational, patient, and consistent. We avoided stupid mistakes. We let compound interest do its work. That's it. You can do the same thing on a smaller scale. You won't build a company worth hundreds of billions, but you can build a comfortable retirement. You can avoid poverty. You can make rational decisions that serve your future self. That's within reach for anyone willing to think clearly. The world rewards rationality in the long run, even though it often rewards irrationality in the short run. Be patient, be disciplined, be honest with yourself. And for heaven's sake, don't keep all your money in cash and wonder why you're not getting ahead. Now go think about your own situation. Write down your answers to those 5 questions I gave you. Look at the actual numbers, what you earn, what you spend, what you have in cash, what you have invested. Get brutally honest with yourself. Then make a plan based on rationality, not emotion. Based on math, not feelings. Based on long-term outcomes, not short-term comfort. And stick to it. Don't let fear change the plan. Don't let greed change the plan. Just execute consistently. That's how you win, not by being brilliant, but by being consistently not stupid, not by timing the market, but by giving time to the market. Not by finding the secret, but by applying the obvious truths that everyone knows, but few people follow. The choice is yours. You can keep your money in cash, watching it slowly lose value, feeling safe while getting poorer, or you can invest rationally in productive assets, experience volatility, and build real wealth over time. One feels safe, one is safe. They're not the same thing. I know which I choose. I know which I have chosen every day for 8 decades. And I'm telling you, the math doesn't lie. The psychology is predictable. The solution is straightforward. Now it's your turn to decide whether you'll act on.